The wind was loud in the guy wires when Wren Hollis gave up shouting and started climbing the 67 steps after her dog. 40 feet up, in the glass cab of a fire lookout tower that had not watched a fire since 1974, an 11-year-old border collie stood pressed into the northeast corner, nose jammed against a seam in the floor, exactly where she had stood at first light the morning before, and the 18 mornings before that. Pilot had one working eye, a grey muzzle, and hips that clicked on cold days, and she had still beaten a 29-year-old woman up 4 flights of open steel stairs in the dark. Wren did not know it yet, but the board under her dog's chest had been screwed shut in August of 1962 by a woman the Forest Service had spent 63 years pretending to forget, and in time 4 people who had laughed at the pair of them would take it back one by one, and a 5th apology would arrive 63 years too late. 10 weeks before that 19th morning, Wren had carried a cardboard box out of the Interagency Dispatch Center in Halbrook, Montana, with 9 fire seasons behind her and a severance letter folded in her back pocket. She was the one they cut when the budget came down. Youngest full-timer, no husband, no kids, nobody to feed. Easiest name to draw a line through. A woman from the regional office read the letter off a laptop screen and called her a valued team member twice. 9 seasons of overtime and cramped hotel rooms had left $14,000 in her account, and on the drive home she passed the county fairgrounds and saw the sandwich board for the surplus auction, and she went in mostly because going home meant sitting still. Lot 41 came up an hour later. Decommissioned lookout tower, Larkspur Ridge, 40-foot steel frame with a 14 by 14 living cab, 2.1 acres of patented ground beneath it. Sold, as is, where is, contents included. The auctioneer said that last part fast, the way you say something that has never once mattered. Gus Tolliver bid on it for scrap. Gus ran the salvage yard outside Kettle Junction and had a laugh you could hear across a fairground, and he wanted the tower for its steel and figured 4,000 would take it. Wren raised her paddle at 4,200. She could not have explained it under oath. 9 years she had been the voice on the radio telling other people what the mountain was doing, and she had done it from a windowless room that smelled of burned coffee, and here was the opposite of a windowless room, going for the price of a used sedan. Gus pushed her to 6,000, glancing back at her between bids. She took it at $6,100. In the gravel lot afterward, he caught up to her, still grinning, and said, "You want to know what you bought, sweetheart. 67 steps and a view of your own bad judgment. Come spring, you'll pay me to haul it down, and I'd have done it free today." 2 farmers by the stock trailers laughed, and one of them repeated it at the feed store, and by Sunday it had reached her aunt. Ruth Ann had raised Wren since she was 12 and had earned her opinions the hard way, and she served them with the meatloaf. "You have no job," she said. "You spent your savings on a widow's walk in the middle of a national forest. It is a staircase to nowhere, and winter is coming, and you will be up there alone." "Not alone," Wren said. Ruth Ann set down the potatoes and looked at her. "A half-blind sheepdog older than some marriages," she said, "is not company. It is a second funeral you are scheduling." She meant it kindly, which made it worse. The dog had come to Wren the same month as the severance letter. The Teague Ranch south of Kettle Junction had sold in September. The whole outfit, land and iron, and Alton Teague stood in his emptied yard at 81, bound for his daughter's place in Billings, holding a leash he could not take with him. Wren had worked that ranch every summer from 18 to 22. She had known Pilot as the pup that sorted chickens for practice, then as the finest gathering dog in the valley, and then as the veteran who put her head through a wire fence in a March lambing storm to reach a ewe and came back with the wire's signature down the left side of her face. The vet took the eye. Alton kept the dog working. The new owner of the ranch wanted the water rights and the hay ground, and nothing that ate. So the old man pressed the leash into Wren's hand, and the only advice he gave came out like a warning. "She does not retire," he said. "Do not ask her to." Wren and Pilot moved on to Larkspur Ridge the first week of October, which is to say they parked a borrowed truck camper at the base of the tower and started hauling out what 6 decades had left in the cab. Pack rat middens the size of hay bales, 12 panes of glass gone to weather out of 48, a wood stove worth saving, a cot frame worth burning, and dead centre of the floor, bolted down like an altar, the empty steel pedestal where the firefinder had stood before the government took its instruments home and left the room that held them. She swept and scrubbed and glazed while October went, and the cold kept the two of them sleeping in the camper at the base. Then, on a black morning in the middle of November, in the blue dark before sunup, Pilot whined at the camper door, and Wren, half asleep, let her out. When she looked out 10 minutes later, the dog was not nosing the brush line. She was 40 feet in the air. She had climbed 4 flights of open steel steps she had no business climbing, alone, in the dark, and she was standing in the northeast corner of the cab with her nose to the floor and her tail low and still, not casting about after rabbits. Holding the posture Wren had watched for 4 summers on the Teague place, the stance that pinned 100 ewes to a fence line, the whole body drawn down to one quiet point, Wren called her. The good ear turned. The dog stayed. She stayed while the stars went out, stayed through a shaken bag of kibble and the special whistle, and finally Wren climbing up in her socks to drag her down by the collar. At which point Pilot simply lay down on the seam, all 38 pounds of her, and became furniture. When the sun cleared the eastern ridge and lit the glass, she got up on her own, stretched like an old soldier coming off watch, and walked down the stairs ahead of her human, stiff, unhurried, entirely satisfied with herself. The next morning it happened again. Same corner, same hour, same silence. And the morning after that. October burned through money faster than it burned through daylight. Replacement glass ran $19 a pane, and she needed 12. Cedar shakes for the catwalk roof, stovepipe, propane, gas for a truck that did nothing but climb. Water came up the mountain in 7-gallon jugs, 2 at a time, 67 steps at a time. By the 1st of December, the $14,000 was down to $2,900, and Wren was stocking shelves 2 days a week at the Kettle Junction Mercantile to slow the bleeding, which put her in town often enough for the town to enjoy itself. Gus Tolliver came through the Mercantile most Fridays and never missed. "How is the crow's nest?" he would say, loud enough for the register line. Dog talk you into any more real estate. One Friday, a tall old man in a wool coat paid for his coffee, waited out Gus, and said, mildly, that he did not see the sense in it either. Harlan Pruitt had run the Ranger District for 22 years before he retired, and his word in that valley carried the kind of weight that does not need volume. "They pulled the people out of those towers for good reasons, young lady," he said. "Cameras and aircraft see more than eyes do, and a great deal more than dogs do. It was not cruel, it was worse, it was reasonable," and the register line nodded along with it. Meanwhile, the dog kept her appointments. Every morning between first grey and full sun, Pilot climbed to her corner and held her point on the same 3 feet of floor. And every morning Wren stood at the bottom of the tower with her coffee going cold, counting morning 12. Morning 15. Morning 19, the one with the wind, when she climbed up in a gale to drag the dog inside and ended up sitting on the floor beside her instead. Both of them braced against the shudder of the guy wires and felt, or imagined she felt, the faintest cold thread of air rising out of the seam under the dog's nose. She told herself it was the storm. Towers breathe in wind. Everything up there moans and ticks. Still, the vet appointment she had been putting off got made that afternoon, because a dog who climbs a frozen fire tower alone in a windstorm to stare at a floorboard is a dog somebody ought to look at. Dr. Naomi Cifuentes had run the Halbert Clinic for years and did not sugarcoat. She checked the teeth, the remaining eye, the clicking hips, listened to the story with her mouth flattening, and delivered the verdict while Pilot sat on the table with the dignity of a bailiff. 11-year-old herding breeds loop, she said. Pacing, fixations, staring at walls and floors. It is called canine cognitive dysfunction, and with one eye her depth perception is already a coin flip. Keep her off those open stairs before she steps off the edge of one, and let her fixate on something at ground level. $85 to hear that her dog was going senile and her tower was going to kill it, and the drive home was the longest 40 minutes of that whole cold season. She tried to follow the advice exactly once. The next dawn she clipped Pilot to a lead staked by the camper before the sky went grey, and went back inside and made herself not watch, and failed. The dog did not fight the line and did not cry. She walked to the end of it, sat down facing the tower, and held that position for 2 hours, one white forepaw lifted out of the snow crust, her whole ruined face aimed 40 feet up at a corner of glass she could not reach, on duty at the bottom of a rope. Wren came out at 8, unclipped the lead, and never staked it again. She told herself she was indulging an old dog's confusion. What she was actually doing was starting to trust her partner over the diagnosis, because one detail refused to sit down. Sundowning dogs unravel at dusk. Every book and every forum, and Cifuentes herself, said the confusion comes with evening. Pilot had never once held her corner at dusk. At dusk she was a rug in front of the stove. Whatever pulled her up those stairs kept opposite hours from the disease, and it kept them precisely, and in 9 years of reading weather for fire crews, Wren had learned exactly one iron law: that precision has a cause. She started running the problem like the dispatcher she still was. What is different about that corner at dawn, and only at dawn? Light, angle, temperature, air. On a windless morning in the second week of December, with the thermometer at 9 degrees, she climbed up behind the dog, knelt at the seam, licked the back of her hand and held it over the crack between the boards. Cold thread rising, she pulled a single square of tissue from her pocket and laid it flat across the seam, and the tissue trembled, bellied upward like a small sail, and slid an inch toward the dog's paws. The floor was exhaling. All night the frozen air pooled in the closed dead space beneath the cab floor, and when the first sun hit that glass box it warmed like a greenhouse and drew the cold air up through the one seam loose enough to pass it. An hour a day, carrying whatever scent that dead space held. Every clear dawn for 60 years, with nobody standing in the right corner at the right hour to notice, because nobody watched from that tower anymore. Nobody with 2 eyes anyway. She got a knife and a lamp and went over the boards on her knees. Every plank in that floor was fastened with cut nails, driven flush, rusted to shadows. Every plank except one. Under a skin of grime and old floor wax, the short board in that corner held 8 brass screws, slotted heads, countersunk with care and then deliberately hidden, wax pressed into the slots like putty. Nails are how you close a floor. Screws are how you plan to come back. She sat on her heels in the lamplight with her heart going and did the arithmetic of it. 6 decades of government inventory. and one board in one corner that somebody had sealed the careful way and never come back for. Pilot lay down against her thigh, chin on the brass, and sighed. It was Thursday. She decided the board would come up Saturday, at dawn, in the hour the floor breathed, because the find was the dog's, and the dog would be on watch when it opened. If you have ever been the only one who believed an old dog, stay on those stairs with them. And if you want to hear what 63 years of silence sounds like when it finally opens, this is the moment to subscribe. Because the board wren lifted that Saturday changed 4 lives, and one of them belonged to a woman who had been dead since 1998. Saturday came in clear and hard, 7 below at the base of the tower. Wren carried up a lamp, a screwdriver warmed on the stove so the blade would not snap in the cold, a putty knife, and a thermos, and Pilot climbed ahead of her and took the corner, and for once Wren was on time for the appointment. She picked the wax out of the slots by lamplight while the sky went from ink to slate. 6 screws gave up sweetly, as if they had been waiting. 2 fought her for a quarter hour each. When the last one came free, the sun was just breaking against the glass, and the seam had already begun its faint cold exhale, and Pilot stood up and put her nose to the crack, tail dead still. Wren worked the putty knife under the end of the board and lifted, and the sealed years came up with it, an air of cedar and cold tallow and paper, and the dog pushed her head into the gap before the board was fully clear. The cavity between the joists had been lined, floor and sides, with cedar shims and tar paper, a tradesman's job, tight and dry as a bank box. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in waxed canvas and tied off with sash cord, and beneath the bundle a flat cedar case with a sliding lid. She hauled them out with numb fingers, sat back on the boards, and unwrapped somebody's whole silence. 5 government logbooks, buckram covers, spines stamped by year, 1955 through 1962. An oilcloth folder fat with carbon flimsies, tissue-thin duplicates of typed reports, 2 steel boxes of mounted colour slides, hundreds of them. Labelled in white pencil in a small upright hand. A bundle of letters tied with the same sash cord, the top envelope postmarked from the Anvil Ridge lookout, signed inside by a woman who called herself only Birdie. A tobacco tin, and in it, wrapped in chamois, a soft, heavy poke of gold dust, with 3 nuggets riding in it like apple seeds, and a paper sleeve of silver certificates, 1s and 5s. $210 in face value, banded and gone brown at the edges. A leather dog collar, cracked with age, its small brass tag stamped with one word. Smoke, and laid square on top of everything. An envelope of heavier paper with a line of ink across its face that raised the hair on Wren's arms in the cold. For whoever the mountain sends, she read the letter with the dog's chin on her knee. My name is Opal Fenn, it began. I watched from this tower 8 summers, 1955 to 1962, and my dog Smoke watched 7 of them with me. He is buried under the cairn on the North Point. His collar deserved better than a hole in a floor, but I could not make myself carry it down the mountain, so it stays with the rest of what I cannot carry and will not burn. Whoever you are, you have found the records of the Coldfoot fire, and I will tell it to you plainly, because plain is the one way nobody would let me tell it. On the morning of the 4th of August, 1962, at 6:41, I reported smoke in the Coldfoot drainage, bearing 227 from this tower, a grey-white column with its base below the ridge line, drifting east-northeast. The district ranger told me it was creek fog off the cold water, that I had cried smoke twice that season already, and to clear the channel. The official record says the fire was first observed by an air patrol at 10 minutes past noon. By dark, it had taken 11,000 acres. It took the mill at Coldfoot and 19 homes along the creek, and it came within one ploughed field of taking the school. By September, the inquiry wanted to know how a staffed lookout had failed to detect a fire burning 12 miles off her front porch, and the district radio log, which lived in the district office, showed no traffic from me until afternoon. I took my own logbook down the mountain to show them different, and a man in a pressed shirt looked at it for less than a minute and told me the official record was already complete. I was not called back the next season, and the word they used in the file was unreliable. Here is what I did that they do not know. At 7 that morning, I sent my regular weather relay and I put the smoke in it. Time first seen and the bearing, right in with the wind and the humidity, because weather went past the district to the regional office, filed by clerks who never knew what wanted burying. If you have a fairer year than mine, find the received copy of my morning weather for the 4th of August, 1962. It has always said 6:41. The dust in the tin is from the gravel bars of Coldfoot Creek, Sundays, 8 summers, and the bills are wages I never found a use for at 7,000 feet. The mountain has decided they are yours now, and I would rather arm a stranger than flatter the men who called me a liar. Watch the dawn, for me, whoever you are. The seam breathes at sunup. Smoke used to rest his nose on it, and I never did learn what he heard down there, and I built his hiding place there on purpose, so that some part of him would always have the post. The last line of the letter was a single short sentence, and Wren read it 4 times in the cold with her breath clouding the ink, and did not yet know she would one day read it out loud to a room full of people who had spent 60 years telling this story wrong. She did not go to town that day or the next. She photographed every page where it lay before she moved a single one, then read 2 logbooks by stovelight with her dinner going cold, and what was in them was not a mystery, it was competence, page after page of it. Whether at 7, at 1, at 7. Lightning strikes mapped by bearing and minute. Visibility in miles, smoke sightings called in and confirmed, each one initialed when the district verified it, years of them. Right up until the one morning the initials stop. The page for the 4th of August, 1962, was filled out in the same small upright hand as every page before it. No panic in the letters. 6:41, smoke, bearing 227, base below ridgeline, drift east-northeast, reported. 6:52, column building, reported, advised fog. 7:00, weather relay sent, remark appended. 12:10, air patrol reports fire, Coldfoot drainage. Below that, in the evening line, where 8 years of pages recorded supper and coyotes and the barometer, there were only 6 words. Column visible all night. Smoke restless. Pilot slept until 9 the next morning, flat on her side in the sun. Off duty for the first time since the freeze came, and Wren sat above her with a dead woman's logbook open on her knees and no idea yet how much a town was going to hate being wrong about it. On Monday, she called the Halbrook County Historical Society and asked what they had on the Coldfoot fire, and the curator, a brisk woman named Margot Alcott, laughed before she could stop herself. "It is our famous disaster," she said. "Why?" Wren said the name Opal Fen, and the line went quiet, and Margot said, carefully, that people around here still said that name when they meant asleep at the switch. "Then you should drive up," Wren said. "Bring gloves." Margot came the next afternoon, climbed the tower complaining professionally about liability, and stood over the table an hour without sitting down. Her hands were steady on the logbooks and stopped being steady on the letter. "Do you understand what the weather relay means?" she said finally. "It means a copy that never passed through the district office. If it exists, this is not a story. It is a correction, and corrections have paper. 2 weeks and 3 called-in favors later, they were in the Regional Record Center in Missoula, cranking through a reel of microfilmed morning weather in a basement that smelled of vinegar until the frame came up and neither of them said anything at all. Larkspur Ridge Lookout, 4th of August, received at 6 minutes past 7 in the morning. Wind, humidity, barometer, and appended in the remarks line the sentence that had waited in a drawer through 11 presidents. Smoke sighted 641, bearing 227, Coldfoot drainage, O Fen 60, 3 years in the dark, and it still agreed with her to the minute. There was one man in the valley who had to see it before anyone else did, and Wren owed him nothing, and went anyway. Harlan Pruitt answered his door in Kettle Junction with coffee in his hand, and listened with a committee chairman's patience, and when she said the words Coldfoot and Fen, his face closed like a gate. My grandfather ran that district for 30 years, he said. I know what the file says about the lookout. I have taught with that file. She did not argue. She handed him copies, the logbook page, the letter, the microfilm print with the received stamp, and stood on his porch in the cold while he read, and watched 70 years of family pride negotiate with 1 page of weather. She called it 5.5 hours before the record says anybody saw it, he said at last, mostly to himself. To his lasting credit, he did not reach for a single excuse. Where did you get this? Under a floorboard, Mr. Pruitt, Wren said. A dog found it. The Historical Society called its winter meeting for the last Friday of January at the Grange Hall, and word had gotten around enough to fill the chairs and line the back wall, mercantile regulars, retired hotshots, 2 reporters, Ruthann in the second row, Gus Tolliver by the coat rack pretending he had wandered in. Margot laid it all out, the auction, the board, the cash, the microfilm, Opal's own slides projected on the wall, a black and white shepherd dog asleep against the firefinder pedestal, and the column of the Coldfoot fire itself, photographed from the catwalk at dawn while the district was still calling it fog. Then Harlan Pruitt stood up with the carbine in his hand, and the room went church quiet. I have told the story of the lookout who slept for most of my life, he said. I told it at trainings. I told it to my own children as a lesson in vigilance. She called that fire at 6:41 in the morning, 5 hours and 29 minutes before the record I taught from says it was discovered. The record was wrong, and the record was my family's, and I was wrong every time I told it, and I am not going to soften that with a single other word. He sat down. Gus Tolliver did not fully stand, but his voice carried fine from the coat rack. I bid on that tower for scrap, he said. Told this girl at the fairgrounds she had bought 67 steps to her own bad judgment, and most of you heard me say worse at the store. Best $6,000 anybody ever spent in this county, and it stings me that it was not mine, and I had it coming. Dr. Cifuentes stood up near the aisle with her arms crossed. I charged her $85 in December, she said, to call that dog senile and order her off the stairs. That dog was not declining. That dog was on shift. The refund is in the mail, and I would appreciate everyone forgetting I ever said the word dysfunction. Then Wren, who hated microphones, read them the end of Opal's letter with Pilot lying against her boots, and gave the room the last line under the ink, the one sentence the mountain had kept all this time. I was not wrong. I was early, and early always looks like wrong to the people who come late. Nobody clapped for a moment, which was better than clapping. In March, the regional office was shamed into the thing bureaucracies do last. It corrected the record. An errata sheet went into the Coldfoot file with Opal's carbons attached. The discovery time struck through and rewritten as 6:41, detection credited to Ofen. Ellsworth Pruitt had died in 1981 with a conference room named after him. The room kept his name. The file stopped lying. Margot traced Opal to Spokane, 30 years keeping ledgers for a lumber company, no husband, no children, gone in 1998, and Harlan drove there himself that spring and put flowers on a bookkeeper's plain grave. In May, the county bolted a bronze plaque to the tower's east leg, her name, her 8 summers, and one line. She called it at 6:41. As for the tin, the auction card had said contents included, and Gus himself offered to testify to it. A dealer in Missoula weighed 9 troy ounces of dust and nuggets and wrote a check for $24,000, and a collector took the certificates for $600 more. It paid the taxes, re-roofed the catwalk, and retired the mercantile shifts. The logbooks, the slides, and the letters went to the archive under Opal's name. Donated, Smoke's collar stayed, oiled soft again, on a nail by the door where the dawn light finds the brass. In June, the district signed a cooperative agreement it had not offered anyone in 50 years, a volunteer lookout post on the ridge, and Wren keyed the radio she had spent 9 seasons answering from the other side. Halbrook Dispatch, Larkspur Ridge Lookout, in service. A pause, then her old shift lead came back, grinning through the static. Copy Larkspur, welcome back. Alton Teague rode up with his daughter in July to see the plaque and found Pilot on the catwalk, Chin on the northeast board, one eye on 40 miles of timber. Told you, he said. She never retired, she just changed districts. Ruthann came up one Sunday with a foil pan of meatloaf and stood in the glass room a long time, looking at the plaque below, the mountains going blue, her niece's name on a government agreement pinned above the desk. I called this a staircase to nowhere, she said. I have been wrong about where nowhere is. That is the apology. Do not make me stretch it. Wren did not make her stretch it. Some doubters bring meatloaf, and that is concession enough. If an old dog holding her post through a month of frozen dawns put a lump in your throat, tell her so. The comments reach the mountain. Before you go, settle the one question this story cannot settle itself. Some will say Pilot smelled the cedar and old leather and a shepherd's collar breathing up through that seam at sunup. Others will say a working dog knows an unfinished watch when she is standing on one, and that Smoke's post simply got handed down the line, dog to dog, the honest way. Scent or duty? Tell me which one you believe in the comments. And come back for the next story, because the letters from Birdie are still being read at the archive. The county says the Anvil Ridge Tower goes to auction in the spring, and there is a coffee can on Wren's counter that is not for coffee. Right where you are watching from tonight, while you are down there, this channel keeps its own logbook and reads every line. These mornings, the seam still breathes at sunup, and the light comes over the eastern ridge onto old glass and new cedar, steam rising off a coffee cup on the sill, and a one-eyed dog lies easy in the northeast corner of a tower that watches again, chin resting on the board that kept its promise.